Good afternoon and welcome to AP European History with Mr. Bobby. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 22, Section 1 of the Mackay, Hill and Buckler text, 7th edition, the history of Western society. This chapter, entitled The Revolution in Energy and Industry, is really where we start what we would consider the modern age. And we're going to start seeing a lot of connections now as we start this discussion of the Industrial Revolution with modern day living. The Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain for many reasons. Those are listed in your text pretty much immediately: expanding Atlantic economy, agriculture, and then other miscellaneous key items that went along with that. The expanding Atlantic economy. Great Britain had done a great job at expanding in Latin America and Africa. They had a great proximity to water. They had a great navy. And they benefited from a canal building boom, which also helped to connect them more quickly and readily to other parts of the world. Great Britain also had enormous deposits of iron and coal, and no tariffs to hinder trade, and a lot of monopoly over the colonies that they had expanded towards in those regions. Agriculturally, food production was at an all-time high, and innovation in agriculture also expanded that production, meaning less people had to work at producing the food. More people could then set aside time to advance technology, and we're going to see with this population growth, and also some theories on that. Other assets. Great Britain had an effective central bank, solid credit markets, and a burgeoning modern economic infrastructure that really laid the groundwork and support for investment in industry. Their government had been stable for a very long period of time. This goes back to the establishment very early on of a constitutional monarchy and then moving forward. And that stability in government increased confidence. And along with that growth in population and confidence in government, there was this increased labor force that was waiting to work. The textile industry is where everything starts. Okay, the first factories were textile factories. There were growing demands for textiles, and they pushed the creation of these first large factories. Before this, we had cottage industries, and we had the putting out system. That putting out system, if we review from chapters 19 and 20, was that idea that families would work within their home. Factories would put out yarn specifically to be spun. They were somewhat inconsistent in production, and they were mostly inefficient, okay? And really this need for cotton textiles exposes that inefficiency. A couple of the big innovators noted in this early part of the chapter: James Hargreaves, who creates the cotton spinning jenny around 1765. And this was used so that women could more efficiently spin a finer and more slender thread. Okay, they used one hand to spin, and that worked a contraption that would then create a fine thread. Richard Arkwright creates the water frame, and this is a water-powered, essentially, version of the spinner that put out a coarse, strong thread that was then broken down once again into a finer thread. And this was later enhanced again by Samuel Crompton. And we'll see this as a continuing theme, that idea that something is created. We'll see this in railroads. We'll see this in the iron industry. Something is creative and now created, and now people are expanding off of those creations and building on that technology. Cotton goods became much cheaper. They were owned by all classes. This is what's going to move us toward what we call class consciousness, this idea that everybody is now owning certain luxury items. Most specifically in your text, it talks about underwear, okay, and body linens being something that was a luxury that we may not think of or take for granted, that was now used by all classes of people. The wages that weavers received rose quickly. And many agricultural workers, because of the ability to produce food being made by less people, were able to become weavers. Okay. Edmund Cartwright creates the power loom in 1785. It works very poorly at first, but as advances keep moving forward, this idea of the power loom is really what's going to move us into the modern day factory. However, there are still a lot of cottage workers that are really hesitant about this idea of large factories. So most of the orphanages, and there were quite a few foundling children, as referred to back in chapters 19 and 20, that were readily available, basically gave industrial factory owners children, and a majority of the labor very early on came from children. They were basically enslaved. They were locked in at night, 13 to 14-hour days, and really horrific treatment. This would eventually lead to the reform movement and labor laws that we're going to see later in this chapter, and then more closely developed in chapter 23. By 1831, the cotton industry was making up 22% of Britain's industrial output, and this was tremendous growth in a very short period of time for what had been a dominantly agrarian society. It still was. Majority of people still farmed, but we're starting to see this shift. Energy was a big problem. Energy not only for people, but the energy created to possibly run machines. Prior to this time, energy sources had been plants and animals, including humans. Things were powered by humans, and after that by animals, and the energy that those power sources received came from plants. They needed a solution, and that solution to the energy problem would cause continued industrialization. Energy from land was limited, and Britain was running out of wood fuel, which is what they had predominantly used as a source for heat, and charcoal for iron. And it was the advent and the discovery, really, of coal that really opens things up. Coal could create 27 times the power of a human for industrial use. And that really assists in not only, as it was used very early on for just heat, but the advent of the steam engine. Your text gives a special section to the steam engine. It's incredibly significant. They were very inefficient at first. It gives a lot of credit to the first steam engines being created by a gentleman by the name of Savery and Newcomen. But really, the man who's given credit for a really efficient steam engine is James Watt. He is called out one day to fix a Newcomen engine, and he realizes and discovers after a lot of study where the inefficiency comes from in that engine, and basically creates and adds a condenser to that engine and creates a much more efficient steam engine that will be used continually now throughout. Steam engine is used and encouraged in other industries. It provides for textile expansion, provides for expansion of the mining of coal. Iron made coke available. Coke is made from coal and will be used to further enhance the iron making industry. This is done by Henry Cort, who develops the puddling furnace and uses coke to increase iron production. Efficient transportation was the next step. Okay, efficient transportation that could supplement the waterways. Lots of renditions of the steam locomotive started out as early as 1800, but really the credit is given to George Stephenson for the first effective locomotive, which he labels the Rocket. And the Rocket is a line from Liverpool to Manchester. Okay, this steam engine, the steam locomotive, is going to move people and basically slowly dismantle the cottage industry because it's going to give people lower transportation costs, larger markets are expanded, makes goods cheaper, and really starts to make everybody realize that the factory in the urban center is a viable economic option. Railroads changed the outlook and value of society, from painters like Turner and Monet, who glorify them in locomotives in their work, to actual engineers like Brunel and Brassey, who are mentioned in your text, who are treated like idols, like rock stars, essentially, because of the railroad lines that they created, going through mountains and going through other geographic features. Finally, we're coming to that point in realization of just how far society has come. And in 1851, there's an industrial fair in London called the Great Exhibition, and this is held in a newly created building called the Crystal Palace. And the Crystal Palace is significant because it is the representation of how far and how quickly during this industrial age, this new industrial age, society has come. It's a structure made completely of glass and iron. The Great Exhibition is held within it, showing all kinds of technological advances, and it really reflects the growth and vitality of the population. It's considered the workshop of the world, and it also demonstrates clearly how superior at this point in time Great Britain is to continental Europe, still really to the United States, and pretty much any other place on earth. Okay? The GNP, the gross national product, quadruples, okay, multiplies by 400%. But we're still seeing some inefficiencies that are going to lag behind as consumption is only growing by 75%. Population goes from 9 to 21 million individuals. Now, this creates some theories, and two of those theorists are really kind of down on what this industrial revolution means to the general populace. David Ricardo creates the iron law of wages, and he deduces that wages are always going to be low, and this is a reflection of that idea of how relative to the production, people's lives are going to change. And Thomas Malthus writes an essay on the principle of population, and his theory is that population will always exceed food supply. Therefore, wage earners will always be lagging behind economically. Fortunately, in the long run, both are proven wrong. But at this time, there was still a lot of skepticism. We tend to look back at this Industrial Revolution as this great time of innovation, which it was, but for people who were living it at the moment, there were still some questions and concerns about what it was going to mean for the general populace.